In this video under the Child and Adolescent Literature, we will talk about book formats, literary elements, and book awards. Book formats. One way of categorizing books is to look into the formats they are printed. The following are some of the book formats which are usually used mostly under children's literature category. Picture books. Norton 2010 explained that most children's books are illustrated, but not all illustrated children's books are picture books. What makes a picture book distinctive is that it conveys its message through a series of pictures with only a small amount of text or none at all. The illustrations are as important as more important than the text in conveying the message. Books that have no text at all are called wordless or textless books. Easy to read books. A format specifically designed to give beginning readers successful independent reading experiences has the generic name easy-to-read books. Some publishers have their own trademark names for their easy-to-read series. For example, I Can Read and Ready-to-Read books. The uniqueness of easy-to-read books makes them simple to recognize. First, because they are read independently by children. The books are smaller than regular picture books. In addition, the pages look very different. The illustrations are designed to give clues to the meanings of the words, but the pictures are smaller and less profuse, allowing the text to take up a greater proportion of each page. A liberal amount of white space is achieved by larger prints, more space between lines, and lines that end with a phrase rather than running flush to the right margin. Perhaps the most significant characteristic of easy-to-read books is the restricted vocabulary. Usually, fewer than 250 different words appear in a book, and these are arranged in short, simple sentences, often with word patterns, repeated text, and even rhyming lines to make decoding new words easier. The difficulty of the vocabulary is also controlled, with the majority of the words having only one syllable. Illustrated books. As children grow from the infancy to adolescence, they will notice that the books targeted for them have increasingly fewer illustrations. Books for very young children are primarily illustrations with little or no text, or picture books. As children develop, books made for them have illustrations that convey part of the message, but the text is needed for the complete storyline. As they begin to read independently, their books have illustrations that add to the story, but there are fewer of them, and the text itself could stand alone. These books are called illustrated books. Though the illustrations depict what is happening in the story, they do not provide new information. The text is clearly more important than the illustrations. Graphic novels. Graphic novels are not new, especially for adults. However, in recent years, they have become enormously popular with children and adolescents. The definition of graphic novels is still evolving, but as literature format, it is defined as novels whose stories are told through a combination of illustrations and text. They are longer than picture book, about 64 to 128 pages, and instead of full-page illustration, the story is most often presented in illustrated panels similar to comic books. Most graphic novels are illustrated with the same artistic quality of modern picture books, and some fans of this format even consider them a unique art form. Though many graphic novels are fantasy, they can be found in all genres of literature, and the tone can be humorous or serious. Chapter books. As children approach adolescence, the books targeted for them become longer and have even fewer illustrations. Sometimes the only illustration is a picture on the book, jacket, or cover. This format is commonly referred to as the juvenile novel or junior novel. Of course, children do not restrict their reading to fiction novels. They also read non-fiction works such as biography and informational books. Non-fiction books are called in this category chapter books. This term connotes that they are lengthy enough for the author to divide into chapters. Lynch Brown and Tomlinson 1999 described the nonfiction chapter book as a format that features a large amount of text organized into chapters. In a nonfiction chapter book, graphic and illustrations are common but are still less important than the text. Almost all biographies, with the exemption of picture book biographies, appear in this format. Hardcover books. It was primarily discussed that the format of books in terms of size, shape, ratio of illustration to text, and difficulty of text. Format also refers to aspects of the physical makeup of a book such as the quality of binding and paper. The publisher's hardcover editions are the highest quality books. Covers are usually constructed of heavy-duty cardboard covered with quality glossy paper. The pages of the book are sewn together, and they are held inside the cover by sturdy end papers that are glued to the inside of the front and the back cover. Designs that pertain to the book's subject or theme colorfully decorate the end papers of many hardcover picture books. Hardcover books are durable, and the high-quality paper ensures the best color reproduction of illustrations. This is the best format for books that are going to be read repeatedly, such as picture books. However, hardcover books are expensive, and a major loss occurs if classroom copies becomes misplaced or permanently borrowed. Also, from a teacher's practical point of view, they are heavy to carry and take up a lot of shelf. Paperback books. Most books are first issued in hardcover and later are issued in paperback to reach a new market of buyers looking for less costly books. Usually, the pages of softcover books are made of somewhat lower quality paper. Instead of being sewn, the pages are glued together and then glued to a stiff paper cover. Quality paperback books can be identified because they have the spine. That is, when you place them on a shelf, you can see the back edge of the book where the title and names of author, illustrator, and publishers are printed. Paperback is probably the best format for juvenile novels and chapter books that children may read only once. Merchandise books. These are much less likely to be found in libraries or bookstores. These books are called merchandise books in the publishing trade because their primary purpose is to sell something: movie tickets, dolls and toys, backpacks, admission to theme parks, and countless of other things. Why do these merchandise books sell so well? Perhaps it is because they are readily accessible. Most families include someone who goes shopping each week. In addition, these books are relatively inexpensive, partly because of the way they are constructed, but also usually because of the mediocre quality of the content. Have you ever read a book that was so good you felt disappointed when you were finished because you wanted to know what would happen next to the characters? That is why authors write sequels. When a sequel to a sequel is written, it makes a trilogy. If the author writes a fourth related book, it becomes a series. All the books in a series will have some unifying element, such as characters or theme. Series also exist among non-fiction books. Some series, however, are written according to a formula, and they vary only slightly from one book to the next. Formula books are often found for sale with the merchandise books. Perhaps that can partially explain their enormous success. They are readily accessible to parents and children. Ebooks. Newest on the scene are ebooks or electronic books. They can be downloaded from a variety of sources such as Project Gutenberg and an internet bookstore. Reading an ebook on a computer screen might be hard on the eyes, and a computer limits portability, even a laptop. Printing a book out would take time and money for ink and paper, and it would be bulky compared to a paperback edition. However, a number of lightweight reading devices can hold hundreds of books and permit thousands of page views before the batteries run out. Literary elements. A review of literary elements will heighten teachers' awareness of literary criticism and to provide a more precise vocabulary to be able to express one's responses to child and adolescent books. Literary terms may also be considered as tools that students can use to initiate and sustain conversation about literature. Discussing one's responses to these books with children, teachers, and other students and listening to their responses will also help one in becoming a more appreciative critic. Understanding the different parts or elements of a piece of fiction and how they work together can help one become more analytical about literary works, and this too can improve one's judgment of literature. In this review of literary elements, we will focus on the elements of fiction. The plot. The events of the story and the sequence in which they are told constitute the plot of the story. In other words, the plot is what happens in the story. Plot is the most important element of fiction to the child reader. Often, adults believe that a story for children needs only to present familiar everyday activities and the daily routines of life. Perhaps 2 and 3 years olds will enjoy hearing narratives such as this, but age 4, children want to find more excitement in books. A good plot produces conflict to build the excitement and suspense that are needed to keep the readers involved. In young adult literature, the plot's importance cannot be overemphasized. For many reluctant readers, it is the action and movement of the plot rather than the detailed descriptions of the setting or the characters that draw them into the story. Young adults seem to prefer books with interesting plots to which they can relate. In books with well-written plots, events seem logical and natural, not contrived or artificial, and reflect the interest of adolescents. Plot is an important element to all readers, but especially to young readers who enjoy fast-moving, exciting stories. A well-constructed plot contributes substantially to children and adolescents' acceptance and enjoyment of story. Forms of plot conflict. Person against person. Conflict arises between the main character, protagonist, and one more opposing characters, as in the struggle between Harry Potter and Voldemort or Draco Malfoy in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Person against society or culture. The protagonist struggles against the rules or expectations of society, and as in the struggle of Jonas against a utopia or dystopia in The Giver. Person against nature or environment. The protagonist struggles to survive, often found in adventure stories such as those by Gary Paulsen and Will Hobbs. Person against self. An internal emotional or intellectual conflict pulls the protagonist in different directions. Plot features. Plots are constructed in many different ways. However, it is important to note that as compared to children's literature, writers of young adult literature can employ a number of these plot features. The most common plot structures found in children's stories are chronological plots, which cover a particular period of time and relate the events in order within the time period. For example, if a book relates the events of one week, then Monday's events will precede Tuesday's, and so on. Two distinct types of chronological plots are progressive plots and episodic plots. In books with progressive plots, the first few chapters are the exposition, in which the characters, setting, and basic conflict are established. Following the expository chapters, the story builds through rising action to a climax. The climax occurs, a satisfactory conclusion or denouement is reached, and the story ends. An episodic plot ties together separate short stories or episodes, each an entity in itself with its own conflict and resolution. These episodes are typically unified by the same cast of characters and the same setting. Often, each episode comprises a chapter. Although the episodes are usually chronological, time relationships among the episodes may be non-existent or loosely connected by during the same year or later that month. Because episodic plots are less complex, they tend to be easier to read and lend themselves to the recounting of humorous escapades. Thus, the reader who is just making the transition from picture books to chapter books may find these plots particularly appealing. Many easy-to-read books for the beginning reader are also structured in this way. Authors use a flashback to convey information about events that occurred earlier, for example, before the beginning of the first chapter. In this case, the chronology of events is disrupted, and the reader is taken back to an earlier time. Flashbacks can occur more than once and in different parts of a story. The use of a flashback permits authors to begin the story in the midst of the action but later fill in the background for full understanding of the present events. Flashbacks in children's books are mostly found in chapter books for older readers because such plots can confuse children younger than 8 or 9 years old. In contrast, a stylistic plot device that prepares readers for coming events in a story is foreshadowing. This device gives clues to a later event, possibly even the climax of the story. Characters. Characters, the actors in a story, are another element of fiction vital to the enjoyment of a story. A well-portrayed character can become a friend, a role model, or a temporary parent to a child reader. Although young readers enjoy exciting events, the characters involved in those events must matter to the reader, or the events no longer seem important. How characters are depicted and how they develop in the course of the story are important to the reader. In case of the young adults, when adolescents identify closely with the characters, they become involved with the experience in the book. Authors reveal information about individual characters in a number of ways. What a character says, thinks, and does, what others say or think about the character, or how they relate to the character, and the narrator's description of the character. Two aspects to consider in studying a character are characterization and character development. Characterization refers to the way an author helps the reader know a character. The most obvious way an author can do this is to describe the character's physical appearance and personality. Portraying the character's emotional and moral traits or revealing her relationships with other characters are more subtle and effective techniques. In the most convincing characterizations, we see the character through a combination of his or her own actions and dialogue, in responses of other characters to him or her, and the narrator's description. Character development. Character development refers to the changes, good or bad, the character undergoes during the course of events in the story. If a character experiences significant, life-altering events, we as readers expect that the character will somehow be different as a result of those events. Setting. The time and place in which the story occurs constitute the setting of a story. The setting's importance depends on the story. For example, in historical fiction, the authentic recreation of the period is essential to the comprehension of the story's events. In this situation, the setting, fully described in both time and place, is called an integral setting. The story could not be the same if placed in another setting. The setting can be much more than a physical description. Sounds, smells, the kinds of buildings, the quality of light, the climate may combine to create the mood and atmosphere for the characters and conflicts. Anne Devereux Jordan, 1996, suggested that the setting can assume the role of a character, especially in situations where nature or the environment helps or hinders the characters. Although some works, such as historical fiction, may depend heavily on a specific realistic setting, other books may have a setting that expands rather than limits the universality of the story. Perhaps the setting is totally imaginary, or it may be loosely defined to provide additional interpretations to the book. A setting may create a mood, create conflict, provide historical background, or add to the symbolism in the plot. Theme. The literary theme of a story is its underlying meaning or significance. The term theme should not be confused with the topic or theme as used in the sense of a thematic unit. Although we sometimes think of the literary theme as the message or moral of the story, it can just as likely be an aesthetic understanding, such as an appreciation for nature or viewpoint on a current societal issue. To identify the theme, you may ask yourself what the author's purpose was in writing the story or what the author is saying through this story. A theme is more than a single word or phrase such as love or growing up. As Reyes notes, a theme such as growing up asks us to make difficult choices and decisions about who we love is much more complex and requires more thought and analysis on the part of the reader. Although some authors openly state an explicit theme, in most cases, the theme is implicit or implied and is revealed through the characters, the conflict, and the setting of the book. Sometimes a book has several themes, often with one more important than the others. Themes in children's books should be worthy of children's attention and should convey truth to them. Furthermore, the themes should be based on high moral and ethical standards. A theme must not overpower the plot and characters of the story. However, children read fiction for enjoyment, not for enlightenment. If the theme is expressed in a heavy-handed, obvious fashion, then the pleasure of reading experience is diminished. Likewise, overly teachy or didactic themes detract from a reader's enjoyment of a story. Certainly, a well-written book may convey moral message, but it should also tell a good story from which the message evolves. In this way, the theme is subtly conveyed to the reader. Common themes in young adult books usually present the author's perspective on the concepts such as growing into adulthood or coming of age, accepting responsibility, confronting problems in life such as death and dying, illness or poverty, and learning to deal with parents, other adults, and friends. Style. Style is the way an author tells the story. It can be viewed as the writing itself, as opposed to the content of the book. However, the style must suit the content of the particular book. The two are intertwined. Different aspects of style are considered in evaluating a work of fiction. Words. Most obviously, you can look at the words chosen to tell the story. Are they long or short, common or uncommon, rhyming or melodic, boring and hackneyed or rich and challenging, unemotional or emotional, standard dialect or regional minority dialect? The words should be appropriate to the story being told. As an evaluator of books for children, you will want to ask the following questions as you read. Why did the author choose these words? What effect was the author trying to achieve? Sentences. The sentences may also be considered. Do they read easily? Do they flow without the reader needing to reread to gain the meaning of the text? Sometimes an author chooses to limit the word choices to write a book that can be read by a beginning reader. Yet in the hands of a gifted writer, the sentences will remain no less melodic, varied in length and structure, and enjoyable to the reader and hear than sentences in the best books for more advanced readers. Organization. The organization of the book may be considered by noting the paragraphs and transitions, length of chapters, heading and chapter titles, preface and notes, prologue, epilogue, and the length of the book. For the beginning reader, it is important whether a story is divided into chapters. After years of looking at it, listening to, and reading books without chapters, it is quite an accomplishment for a 6-year-old to move up to a so-called chapter books, even if each chapter is only 3 pages long. Chapter titles can provoke interest in what will follow, as well as provide the reader with clues to predict story events. Some books provide the readers with the prologue, an introductory statement telling events that precede the start of the story. Some authors include an epilogue, a concluding statement telling events that occur after the story has ended. Point of view. The author's perspective in telling the story is called the point of view. The 3 main points of view are first person, third person singular, and third person omniscient. In the first person point of view, the pronoun I is used, and the story is told from the perspective of one of the characters, and the reader sees everything through the eyes of that character, who may or may not be the protagonist. Sometimes authors present the first-person point of view through a diary or journal written by the character. When an author writes in the third-person singular, he or she writes from the point of view of one character and only describes those feelings or experiences of which the character is aware. Sometimes this is referred to as looking over the shoulder of one of the characters. Finally, using the third-person omniscient point of view, an author is all-knowing about the details of the plot as well as the conscious or unconscious feelings of all of the characters. Sometimes authors use multiple point of view, perhaps by having different chapters told by different characters, switching between 2 major characters for alternating chapters or interspersing short, first-person reflections in an otherwise third-person omniscient narrative. Symbolism. Symbolism is an artistic invention that authors use to suggest invisible or intangible meanings by analogy to something else through association, resemblance, or convention. Often, a symbol, a person, object, or situation represents an abstract or figurative meaning in the story in addition to its literal meaning. Some symbols are universal and can be found repeatedly in literary works. Others may be particular to the story. For example, a farm usually represents love and security in the works of literature. Children often read only on a literal level, but they can be helped by teachers to note more obvious symbols existing in the books they are reading. If the symbolic feature recurs in the story, it is referred to as a motif. Book Awards. Book Awards under Children's Literature. Several book award programs have been established for the purpose of elevating and maintaining the literary and artistic standards of children's books and for honoring the authors whose work is judged by experts in the field to have the greatest merits. These awards provide teachers and librarians with one source of selecting excellent works of literature to share with children. Table 3.1 lists what are considered to be major awards for children's books in the United States, Canada, and Great Britain. Book Awards for Young Adult Literature. A number of general awards are also given to young adult literature. While these awards honor specific authors and books, they also promote quality young adult literature in general by heightening public awareness of excellent literature and increasing the readership of good books. And that ends our video on child and adolescent literature, particularly on book formats, on literary elements, and on book awards. Please do not forget to like and subscribe on this channel.